It's my absolute pleasure to bring you another episode of AfriGO Conversations. It's June already. Where has a year gone? Today, I'm excited to bring to you a missionary, a missions mobilizer all the way from Uganda. East Africa has been represented this time around. Welcome, Sam Opolot.
Thank you very much, Mercy. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a joy to join in this conversation. I praise the Lord for the opportunity to share. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you please tell us more about yourself, your ministry, and what you're doing in Uganda?
My name is Samuel Opolot, and I initially trained as a teacher, high school teacher, and taught for a few years. Later on, I felt the leading to get involved in student ministry, and so I joined the Focus staff team. I served with Focus from 2000 to 2012, a period of about 12 years, serving in various capacities, first as regional secretary, later on serving in the national office, and finally leaving at the time I was acting general secretary of Focus. At that time, I felt led together with a few other people to start a missions organization, and there's a whole story around that. But yeah, I'm married to Alice. We have 2 children, Timothy and Cheryl, and that's really me.
One of the things that I know Sam does is I know you are involved in missions mobilization. I would like us to talk about churches and the sending of missionaries, because I keep talking to missionaries every Monday as we write our Missionary Monday segment. And one of the rallying cries I get is, we need more people. And sometimes I ask, where is the problem? And they say, the churches are not sending us. So, are we sending enough, Sam?
Are we sending enough? We are not. The harvest is certainly plentiful. There's a lot of work to do. In Uganda alone, we still have quite a number of unreached people groups. There are at least 4 indigenous unreached people groups in Uganda. But we also have, so many people from unreached, ethnicities that have moved in either for business or as refugees or just expatriate, but there are whole communities here. And we don't have enough manpower serving among those people. So are we sending enough? My response is no, we are not. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
So if we are not sending enough, what is the problem? Because I think there's a lot of, you are involved in missions mobilization. So I'm sure you have seen some of the reasons why there aren't enough African missionaries going. We appreciate that there are some going, but we also appreciate the fact that the missionaries on the ground to keep more people. And why is the problem? The churches are not sending us more people. Why is that happening, and how can we help the churches to start sending more missionaries?
Mercy, thank you. For a start, I think we come from a tradition of receiving. Imagine, we've been receiving for 100 years plus. So I think that we have a history to overcome, a history of we have always received missionaries. And so there's a sense in which we probably still have that mindset in many ways. We see ourselves as missionaries, as receivers of missionaries, and not so much as senders. And basically, I think part of the problem is we have a long history of receiving. And so to undo that mentality requires a bit of work. The second reason I believe is I feel that we don't have enough indigenous models for mission sending. I think we don't have enough models homegrown that actually work for our people as African, at least for Uganda. I don't think we have enough models. And so because there's not enough models, there's always the question, so how can we do this? I think that if we have more models that are homegrown, that are sensitive to our contextual issues and realities, I feel that we'll see a bit more. The third reason I feel is critical is this has a context. When I left Focus, we felt led to start Global Link Africa. And Global Link Africa was started specifically to mobilize the church in Uganda, but with a view to Africa, to send missionaries. That's why GLA was formed. And initially it was easy because we had relationships with students, having a history of working with students on campus, discipling them. It was, I don't want to use the word easy, but definitely easier to, get students, connect them to mission opportunities and send them because we had a relationship. Now, as years passed, we got to a point where we didn't have that much direct contact with students, at least those of us who were doing mobilization for GLA. And the reality was that it was necessary to build that connection with the local church. And then, obviously, you try to go to the local churches, it's very, very hard for people to connect with what you are saying. And so the realization was that I think we need more voices within the local church championing the cause of missions directly at the local church. What we see currently happening is a lot of the mobilization is being championed by mission agencies and missions organizations, not directly within church, but as missions organizations. And our feeling as GLA was that there needs to be more voices within local church that are championing the cause of missions. Members of the local church trumpeting the cause of missions within local church, whether that be church leaders, but definitely within local church. And so for me, that actually led to the next thing. I felt, okay, this is probably what God wants me to do. And it so happened that as I was thinking about ending my time in leadership with Global Link Africa, my church asked me to be the missions coordinator for the church. And for me, it seemed to connect very, very well because we wanted to see more voices within local church championing the cause of missions. So if you ask me what's the problem, I think one, we have a history that we must overcome, and it sets a mindset that is constantly receiving. But secondly, we need more homegrown models for sending missionaries. And thirdly, I think there's a need for more voices within local church championing the cause of missions. I mean, you could go into issues relating to what kind of discipleship are we actually offering? Are we offering discipleship that has a strong emphasis on missions? Maybe there are gaps there as well. Indeed, there's discipleship happening, but at the end of the day, is there a sufficient emphasis of missions within the discipleship we're offering? So that could be, a fourth one. But I think the fourth one is answered by members and voices within local church that are both discipling and also championing the cause of missions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. And because you mentioned GLA, and I know that you do amazing work there, and you also mentioned models that are relevant and work for the African church. Do you have examples of what church to help the African church send more missionaries, and not just send, even have the people in the African church even support missions in whichever way that they can? What models would that be? Do you have an example?
We, as GLA, we've attempted to do, but it's worked well for short-term options, for example.
Okay.
We've done, we call it a mission internship, but it's really very practical. Okay. So what happens, because a lot of the challenge, Western models emphasize support for the individual. So you have individuals supporting an individual. Now, as Africans, I think we support more as communities as opposed to as individuals. And so what we've tried to do at GLA is communities, local churches pulling a resource, receiving communities also pulling a resource, and the individual missionary also pulling a resource. So we kind of have a model which brings together both a sending church, the individual missionary, and the receiving community. And so in our mission internship programs at GLA, you will find all three working together to support the missionary. Now, what's the benefit? It reduces the pressure, especially for the missionary as an individual, you see, because most Western models put the pressure on the missionary to raise support. For many of us, that's even a foreign concept, at least in Uganda. It's a foreign concept. People will ask you, look for a real job, look for a real job. Find a real job and earn some money, then go. But when the community comes together, the receiving community, the missionary themselves, the church as communities, not just individuals supporting individuals, but as communities, we find that that has been easier to manage than when we have, one person trying to raise support for themselves to go by themselves. That's one model I see. Again, the other thing we're trying to do at our church right now is and it's coming out of a course we ran recently. At church, we recently ran an awareness, course in partnership with All Nations Christian College and AIM. And out of that, the people who attended the course were mainly members of our local church, but we had people from other churches as well. Now, what's emerging is our members who attended that course from our church are adopting a community of missionaries, which, I can't name for security reasons, but are adopting a community of refugees in our neighborhood. Wow. But the way it's working is that members of our local church and other people from other churches who attended the course organized by our local church are pooling resources together. We don't have an individual missionary right now, but the goal eventually is to identify someone who can work with these refugees. But we want to reduce the pressure from the missionary. We want, as a community, to pull resources together. Again, you see the strong emphasis on the community coming together and the missionary being at the front, not having the burden and the pressure of raising the support, because usually that's where the problem is. And so as a community, we want, as a church and the different churches, members from different churches that participated in the course, we want to pull resources and then do outreach with this community of refugees. Again, for me, I think the emphasis for me arises from how we operate as Africans. We usually operate as communities. And I think that there's a strength for mission sending if we tap into, that reality. And if models can be built around emphasis on communities coming together to support missions, I see a lot more sending happening.
That's splendid. That's just splendid. Sam, thank you so much for that. And I want to get back to the churches. And when you say you are now directly involved in the missions department of the church, mobilizing churches and speaking to churches, and we know that churches are shepherded by pastors, and these pastors basically make the decisions for what happens in the church. I want to know to speak to the pastors in the African churches. When you go and find a pastor in their church and there's probably someone who is listening to us, if you are to speak to a pastor today concerning missions and the role of that among his congregation, what would you say? What pointers do you give him on how to get people out of the pews and just go to the field?
I see, again, there is, how do I put it? I think it is true that sometimes there's a struggle with some church leadership especially because, how do I put it? I think there's a bit of fear in light of all the false teaching that's around, the desire to protect our flock, the fear to lose, people who could give to church. Sometimes even the fear to lose, the little resource that might be available. I think there's a sense in which that is true, but there's also a sense in which that there's actually a bit of openness among some of the church leaders to engaging and involving in some of these things. My experience so far is that with good sensitization and a bit of awareness, many pastors actually open up. They actually desire. The key thing is the desire. The key thing is for us to be able to get to that place where we build trust with our church leadership. And I think that's where a lot of the time we mobilizers go wrong. That's number one. Number two, one of the challenges of mobilizers is we do a lot more recruitment as opposed to mobilization. We approach the church with a recruitment mentality. So our desire is simply to get people to go. Now, I think that a lot more emphasis needs to be mobilization in the sense of creating awareness, both with the church leadership, but with the entire church, before even we start talking recruitment. Okay, so we should be first mobilizers, and secondly, importantly, as it is important, but second, recruiters. The reason we find resistance is because we haven't invested in building trust. We are trying to tap into a community that's not fully aware of what this is about. And those are the areas where we need to invest as we do mobilization and champion the cause of sending. So yes, there is resistance, but there's also a lot of openness. If we invest in building trust, if we invest in mobilization first and recruitment second. Yeah.
Mobilization first and recruitment second. What's the difference between those two? How do I know I'm recruiting? How do I know I'm mobilizing? How do I, if I go to a church and they tell them, guys, there's a community in Kenya that needs to be, reached, let's go. As someone who is mobilizing, how do I know the difference? And how do I do mobilizing instead of just recruiting?
Let me say this, recruiters go with the sign-up form first.
Okay.
So the recruiters are carrying the sign-up form first. The mobilizer is going with an awareness tool first. Okay. So we need to invest more in awareness. The Kairos course, the unfinished story, and several other tools, perspectives, several other tools that are available. And because, that's my experience again, especially at my local church level. And the more we sit as a missions committee, the more we realize that in as much as we want people to go, let's invest quite a lot in getting the whole church to be convinced that there is need to go. And so the recruiter assumes that people are ready to go and is asking them to sign up. The mobilizer is aware that probably I need to invest in a lot more awareness. And so spend time creating awareness, sharing the stories, bringing missionaries to share their story, and let their hearts be moved by God. And when we do that, people will sign up on their own. Support will flow by itself. Communities will be built that are willing and ready to support. That's I don't know if that helps at all in drawing the distinction between a recruit and a mobilizer. The good thing is that mobilizers must always be recruiters.
Okay.
Sometimes we hurry to recruit before we mobilize.
Yes, I get it now. If I decide I'm going to mobilize this church to go for missions, I don't just show up with a sign form. Who is going? Let's go. Here's the form. Put your name down. Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you for that kind explanation. And I would like to throw a spanner in the works at this point,
Mm.
because I think this is a
Yes.
conversation with someone who said, "Are we mobilizing more than we are going? Do we need the mobilization right now? And what is the importance of mobilization, especially in the African church?" What would you say to that?
I think the question to that is, have we actually mobilized enough?
Okay,
Have we actually mobilized enough before we start asking whether we are mobilizing more than we are going?
all right.
I think for me, if we were mobilizing enough,
Mm-hmm.
I think we would see churches on their own sending. I look forward to the day when missions organizations will be irrelevant because churches have structures within them that deal with the question of sending, deal with the question of support, deal with the question of member care.
Okay.
Um, I don't think that, personally, I don't think that, at least in the Ugandan context, I don't think that we've mobilized enough. I
All right.
actually think that we need to mobilize a lot more until we see a lot more sending. So if you ask me, are we mobilizing more than we are going? My
Mm-hmm.
question is, have we mobilized enough?
Thank you. Thank you for answering my question with another question. And I think that is a question that the African church actually needs to answer. Are we
Mm,
mobilized enough? And if a mobilizer has come to your church and you have listened to this person saying, you need to go, there is this community to do this and that, have you acted on that at any point?
mm.
Before we say people are not going, have you acted on it at any point? I think that is really nice.
Yeah,
How
and,
in
and that's a
mhm,
critical question. And let me just add one thing. Part
yes,
of the
please.
challenge of our mobilization is that there's a focus on creating awareness without a clear pointer to pathways for responding
Okay,
to to the mobilization.
okay,
Let me give you examples. We ran the Kairos course,
mhm,
and we have so many people who've graduated from the Kairos course.
mhm,
But at the end of the course, there is no clarity on, next
mhm,
possible practical steps.
okay,
And so one of the weakness I see that we as mobilizers have is that we've not provided sufficient pathways,
mhm,
practical pathways for responding actively to the mobilization we are doing. So there's a sense in which mobilization must happen, but
mhm,
there's a sense in which we must also be actively pointing to clear ways of response, not just ending with, now that there's an unreached people group A, there's another unreached people group B.
mhm,
Pathways must be clear. And this is where church and missions agencies must partner, must
okay.
partner. Yeah.
Wow. And thank you for mentioning churches and the mission agencies and partnership.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because I think that is something that we need to talk about. And so, as someone who has been both in a missions agency and I don't know if I can call GLA that, and you've also dealt with churches in terms of missions, do you think we are working together enough? Is there a clash? And if there is, how can that clash be settled?
Again, that's probably contextual. I think that there are quite a number of church leaders who
Okay,
recognize the place and value of
okay,
partnership, and then
okay,
you will see a few of those
okay,
emerging, at least in this country. We
okay,
have a few churches with GLA, at least we have a few churches that recognize the place, but we also know and are aware of, I don't know what to use, a lack of clarity on
mhm,
who should be doing what, maybe even a bit of suspicion and mistrust
mhm,
in some contexts.
mhm,
Um, but you also have missions organizations that want to run the thing on their own. I know an example of in Uganda. I won't
mhm,
name, but there is a
mhm,
missions organizations that they are ready to raise all the money and
mhm,
send the missionary with or without a church connection. I think that that's, in my opinion, that's not sustainable. And I also think that it's not a good model for building ownership, both of the missions enterprise, but also for continuity of such a work. The day that the missions organizations loses funding or has a leadership crisis, that's the day that work will end. But if this happens within local church, church will always be there. As long as it is bought in and there is a buy-in at the local church and there are structures and systems for sustainability within the local church, you see that happening. So there is a sense in which both of us have a bit of work to do as people within local church, championing the cause of missions within local church. We need to be growing the numbers of those who believe in this thing and who are convinced that it's the thing to support, continue to raise support, continue to build structures within local church that ensure sustainability. But again, sharing the story from those of us who have an experience both within, missions organizations and the local church of how that can work. So you have, I think there's a problem in both. Sometimes missions organizations feel they can go it alone, probably out of frustration or I don't know, but probably they feel like they can go it alone. But I think that the partnership needs to happen. In my opinion, for long-term sustainability, local church must own.
The partnership needs to happen for sustainability.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Sam. And if someone wants to get involved in GLA, how can someone do that?
There are several ways. One, you can apply directly with GLA. Usually recruitment for short-termers, the mission internship program. The mission internship program is really like the first level. And usually we are targeting those who are recently out of college or university. And so our recruitment period is February, March, April, and end in June. Yes. By June, usually we are concluding the recruitment. Now, those ones sign in for a 1-year commitment. It's both a missions commitment, but also an opportunity for training. So for those who are seeking to check out, to test, to find out, would I be called to this thing? That would be the one. So they can apply directly to us. They can write to us through their church. They can come through us through their Christian union if they're university students. But yes, that's one opportunity. But for long-termers, usually, again, there's a process of applications, but we would want your church involved in the process. So those are the two I can talk about now. So the mission internship program is open to people who are recently out of university, not limited to, but open. It's a 1-year commitment. You can apply directly through your Christian union or through your local church. For long-termers, also you can apply directly, but we would like your church involved in the process.
Right. And how do we reach you? What are your contacts? Can you give us your email address, website, and number that anybody who's listening today and is feeling, I would like to get in contact with these people? How can they reach you?
You can reach GLA. I don't know. I could probably write that out for you at some point. The email address and the contacts. I can share that with you.
Yes, we'll have them on the screen.
I can have them. I can write that out. But basically, would you want me to share the numbers right here?
We'll just have them on the screen. You can say them and then we'll have them on the screen.
Okay. So the phone contact is, of course, Ugandan code 0256 392 00 33. 256 392 00 33. The email address is simply Global Link Africa, Africa with a K, and globallinkafrica@gmail.com with a single L between link and global. So globallinkafrica@gmail.com. That you will definitely get someone connecting with you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, sir. And I would like to give you a minute. If you want to tell the church in Africa something right now in 1 minute, what would it be?
Two things. One, we have an opportunity to respond to the Great Commission. And I think that over the last more than 100 years, God has been preparing us as a church. We can't have the youngest population in the world for nothing. We cannot have the largest numbers in terms of church commitment and Christian commitment for nothing. There must be something God is surely up to. And I think that we have an opportunity to respond to the Great Commission by committing as a church at local church level to sending people to those parts of the world that are crying out for witness. That's number one. Number two, our excuse many times is that we lack resources. I think that God has endowed us with an array of resources, both in terms of people, in terms of financial resource. I mean, think about the beautiful churches we are building. Think about the flashy wedding ceremonies we put together. Think about the many great things we do. The church in Africa has an opportunity, and I think that God is waiting on us. I don't even know whether that's the right way to put it, but God is looking to the church in Africa to respond in obedience to his command to make disciples of all nations. Let us arise and embrace this opportunity as God gives us grace and enables.
Amazing. Hallelujah. Thank you, Sam Opolot, all the way from Uganda. Thank you so much for gracing AfriGO Conversations with your wisdom, your experience, your insight, your humor. We are so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mercy. It's been a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you too.
Amen.